guys, how's it going? It's Al. This is my running back rankings video for your fantasy football leagues for week 8. I'm going to go numbers 1 through 24. If you have start sit questions, I have the answers and they are right there in the rankings. Just take a look. If you have 3 running backs that you have a question of which 2 should you start on your fantasy team, start the 2 that I have ranked higher. We're going to go through my RB1s, my RB2s, and hopefully you agree, but based on the history, you're not going to. But I don't do these lists to confirm your priors. I definitely don't do them to match somebody else's rankings. I am making my choices based on my projections for the week, and here are my top running backs for week 8. Let's go.
He's a legend.
The Smiz Gang Listener League is posted for week 8. It is a 5,000 person tournament, 5,000 entry tournament. It's $10. It is 3 max and it's absolutely no rank. The best draft. It does not exist in the lobby. The only way to get in is through my links. So go to smizzle.tv/links. You'll find the link to the Listener League in there, as well as links to everything else that I do. My Twitch stream, I'm live 6 days a week. My Instagram account, all of my different socials, my article on ESPN, which is Best Buys, the links for everything exist in the link tree. So go to smizzle.tv/links and join the Listener League today, because it's probably going to fill at some point on Saturday. So make sure that you get your entries in early. After a brief hiatus from the top 24 last week based on the trade, Christian McCaffrey makes his appearance once again all the way at the top. Now, look, you could argue that there should be a couple of guys that I have ranked below him that could be ranked above, but I'm staying with Christian McCaffrey in this spot, one, due to the fact that this is exactly the type of team and running back usage that we want for Christian McCaffrey. He was on a bad offense before. Now all that touchdown upside has come back. We're expecting at least 6 targets a game for McCaffrey in this San Francisco offense, a highly efficient offense. He should also be running against more light boxes when they run the ball with the great running scheme that they have in San Francisco anyway. Yeah, the Rams are a tough defense, but it's not like San Francisco has struggled to put up points against Los Angeles. So Christian McCaffrey stays in the top spot. The king stays the king. Derrick Henry comes in right behind him in the number 2 spot. This is just a great matchup. Obviously, Tennessee not playing at home, but we've streamed running backs against Houston every single week this year. I've got Derrick Henry at number 2, much higher than I typically have him, because I go off full PPR, and Derrick Henry historically has not been consistently involved in the passing game, though the Titans have done a much better job their last 4 games wrapped around a bye week to get him more involved. 6, 5, 2, 3 targets, 16 targets the last 4 games. If he gets 4 targets a game, especially with as much as they feed him the ball on the ground, no less than 20 carries in any game since week 3, up to 30 carries in week 7, 28 carries in week 5, 100-yard bonus. I'm not going to say that it's a lock, but like, he should get you 100 plus yards this week up against this Houston rushing defense that has just allowed yards in chunks to every single running back that's played against them. Them and Cleveland are the 2 teams that we would like to stream running backs against more so than anyone else. He's got that small boost now with that usage in the passing game, and one of the best, most prolific inside the 5 touchdown scores that exists. So anytime Tennessee gets in close, it's going to be the Derrick Henry show. Anytime they're between the 20s, it's going to be the Derrick Henry show. They can't really pass the ball with any efficiency. So are you getting the theme here? It's going to be the Derrick Henry show. At number 3, Saquon Barkley. It's been all about the Saquon Barkley show so far for the New York Giants. They are off to a tremendous start this season, and all but 1 game this year, Saquon Barkley has had over 18.5 fantasy points, averaging 21.5 on the year. Squares off against Seattle, albeit on the road, right? We'd prefer to have our running backs be at home at least. This is and favored. Neither of the situations are there for him this week, but Saquon Barkley still going to get a heavy dose, over 25 opportunities. That's carries plus targets expected in this spot, and Saquon Barkley 100% back to health and flashing what we saw from him a couple of years ago, which is that big playability with high volume, always the guy inside the 5-yard line, as well as having usage in the passing game. Tremendous back, tremendous spot every single week. At number 4, we have a high riser, a helium play, if you will. Josh Jacobs coming off of 3 straight 33-point plus fantasy outputs. If you drafted Josh Jacobs, where you were drafting Josh, round 6, round 7, wherever he fell to in your draft, you've gotten a guy who's probably put you in a spot where you're winning most of your games at this point. 144, 143, and 154 yards each of the last 3 weeks, 6 touchdowns the last 3 games. And to me, most impressively, has been the 20 targets over that span. 5 targets a game for Josh Jacobs, now going up against New Orleans on the fast track at the Superdome. Like, this is just another place where you want to play the volume, right? Like, volume over everything is what we look for, and Josh Jacobs has been getting us 100%. Like, that is exactly what he has been giving us so far this last month, and hopefully that sustains. Like, there was a lot of trepidation of whether this new regime was going to go to a committee approach, because that's what they had always done in New England. They did not pick up his 5th-year option, so like there was a chance that they might move on from him. He has played himself into a bigger role and now has played himself into a spot on this Raiders team where they can't play without him. At number 5, Joe Mixon. You get the Monday night hammer in this one, and you get the dream matchup going up against the Cleveland Browns. Mixon has been very involved in the passing game. We saw him score a rushing touchdown last week, a passing touchdown or receiving touchdown the week before against New Orleans. Basically, he should get the volume here. Yeah, they're going to want to pass it, but they also do have to run the football. They run it way more efficiently out of the shotgun, which is what they've been playing more of the last 3 weeks. So all signs point to Mixon being able to sustain the amount of volume that he's seen with increased efficiency on the ground in terms of like yards per carry, yards before first contact, because when they go out of the shotgun, he's running against way more light boxes, as well as once they get inside the 5-yard line, that efficiency should normalize and create more touchdowns in the second half of the season than he saw in the first half of the season. So Joe Mixon comes in at number 5. At number 6, Alvin Kamara, filing in here at number 6. Like, he has not scored a touchdown, but I'm going to say that I think he's going to score a touchdown more than 0 times this year. The last 3 weeks, 24 targets, 8 targets a game. You're essentially getting wide receiver 1 usage out of Alvin Kamara, and not having to deal with losing anything on the ground. Still 11 carries, 19 carries, 23 carries. You have a very voluminous back in this spot, and that's what I want, right? I want volume over everything. Give me that and assume that the touchdowns will come. With the injuries that they've sustained on the outside to guys like Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry, Alvin Kamara has had to take on a much higher volume role in the passing game, and we know how prolific he has been in that job in the past, historically, his entire career. He's great pass catching back, and the volume's been there on the ground too. So like, the touchdowns are going to recover. Taysom Hill, it's enough already. We're going to see those touchdowns rebound. You cannot have as much volume as Alvin Kamara's had with the big playability that he's had and just score 0 touchdowns on the year. So even better talent than somebody like Miles Sanders, who last year was the no touchdown guy. Alvin Kamara will regress in a positive manner to start scoring touchdowns on the ground. And just based on volume alone, 17.5 fantasy points, 18.4 fantasy points, 27.4 fantasy points the last 3 weeks, averaging 15.8 fantasy points on the year without a touchdown. Dalvin Cook, a little bit more touchdown dependent. And I'd love to have Dalvin Cook ranked higher, but I just can't do it based on the fact that they're not utilizing him in the passing game the last 4 games. 5 targets only the last 4 games, though he does have 4 touchdowns over that span. I don't want to have to play a touchdown reliant running back, even though he is quite talented on a very good offense in a high total game. That's what's holding him in this spot, is that upside for touchdowns. Arizona, not an efficient team at stopping opposing running backs. He comes in at number 7. At number 8, this is a little bit of a shock, as Dameon Pierce has played his way into everybody's hearts. I had mentioned him as a possible candidate for Rookie of the Year, like probably my favorite player to compete for Rookie of the Year this year, after he had basically gotten the job, and I watched him play in preseason, and he was absolutely electric. Passes the eye test. He's on the field all the time. Volume over everything, right? That's what we want. 15 targets the last 3 games, so involved in the passing game. He is now officially a game flow independent running back. If Houston's losing, I don't care. If Houston's winning, it's probably because Dameon Pierce did something awesome. A 20-plus yard run from scrimmage in each of the last 4 games. A touchdown in 3 of those 4 games. The volume has been tremendous. Dameon Pierce, while not a superstar, is basically turning into a fantasy star with an ADP before the season of 140-ish. So if you were drafting early, like in June, July, even the first half of August, until it became apparent that he was going to be the guy, his ADP rose from like 140 all the way up to like the 45, 50 range. So if you got him really cheap in your drafts, best ball drafts, or friends and family, congrats to you, because he has certainly been that type of league winning running back, just averaging as many points as he has this year, 16.1 on average. Just a ridiculous play in his own right. At number 9, Leonard Fournette, 17.3 on average. The Buccaneers offense has been struggling. This game against Baltimore is a very low total, like 41. And if the Buccaneers can like kind of get their act together and start catching balls instead of dropping sure touchdowns, Leonard Fournette's going to thrive. The better the offense does, the better Leonard Fournette's stats are going to be. They need sustained drives. They need to stay on the field. They need to be scoring touchdowns. They need to be in the red zone inside the 5-yard line. The better the Buccaneers can move the ball, the better Fournette's stats will look. The worse they are, the worse he's going to look. Against Pittsburgh, 22 fantasy points. Against Atlanta, 35 fantasy points. Against Kansas City, they lost that game, but they were moving the ball very, very well. And he's still at 18.4 fantasy points. Against Carolina, they couldn't move the ball, 4.6 points. Yes, he is a high volume back. Yes, he's going to get thrown the football. We love that, but like, we need Tom Brady to get back to being something similar to what Tom Brady used to be, as opposed to what Tom Brady is right now. Jonathan Taylor comes in behind him at number 10. I'm shocked that Jonathan Taylor has fallen so much based on how bad this offense. So this was supposed to be one of the top 3, top 4 offensive lines in the league. They are playing horribly. On the bright side, at least they're throwing Jonathan Taylor the ball. Against Tennessee last week, he got 8 targets, caught 7 of them. So like, that kind of buoys his floor. He still has the big play upside. He still has a 100-yard upside for you. He's going to be the guy who gets the ball inside the 5-yard line. But now with the move to Ellinger at quarterback over Matt Ryan, like, we hope that the kid's going to be able to move the football. A lot like Leonard Fournette, Jonathan Taylor needs this offense to stay on the field. The better the offense does, the better the high volume running back does. It's not the same situation some other spots where like they're just going to give him a ton of volume. If they're playing from behind, they're not going to do that. Washington has been a team that's been giving. They are playing at home, a kind of a soft-ish landing spot for the rookie or for the young Ellinger to play his first game, but they've got to feed Taylor, and he's got to get off to get there. I can't rank him any higher than 10. And Nick Chubb comes in at 11. Nick Chubb has been having a fantastic season so far, but we know the danger here, right? Everybody that I have ranked ahead of Nick Chubb on this list, maybe you could say the exception of Dalvin Cook, but a better offensive environment for Dalvin Cook this week. All of them are heavy dose pass game backs. Every single one of them is getting 4, 5, 6 plus targets per game. Nick Chubb is 100% reliant on getting you 100 plus yards from scrimmage. Now, granted, he can definitely do that. And because of his big playability, he can do it even in games where like maybe he gets held to like 60 yards rushing and then he busts off like a 55-yard touchdown run and saves the fantasy week for you. However, as long as Kareem Hunt is there, the dream scenario for anybody who has Nick Chubb on their team is that by the time the deadline gets here, they have dealt Kareem Hunt to somebody else. Maybe Cleveland is trying to acquire some assets. Maybe they're trying to work on something to get a little bit better. But if Nick Chubb gets like 75, 80% of the running back snaps and touches, that would be better for you as a fantasy manager. Now, as long as he's there, look at the carries. He has not touched the ball. He has not carried the ball 20 times any of the last 4 games. His pass game use, sparingly. 11 targets the last 5 games. It's not a great situation. However, he's a great running back. He legitimately is. So he scored 5 touchdowns over that span. But if you take 6 points away from his per game average over that time span, he's really only averaging you like 14 fantasy points per game. So heavily reliant on breaking the big play, heavily reliant on touchdowns. And I just feel better about the other running backs ahead of him. Somebody who has taken the job and squaring out my top 12 is Ramik Stevenson. Even in a loss where they got absolutely throttled, he scored 23.8 fantasy points. Against Cleveland, 25.1. Against Detroit, 22.5. Week 4, 12.9, which I believe in this new role that he's got is probably his floor based on how much he's being used in the passing game. The anti-Nick Chubb, right? Over the last 5 games, he has averaged 5 targets a game. And on Monday night against Chicago, he had 8 targets, caught all 8 of them. Ramik Stevenson, Great big playability. Saw a 20-yard catch from him in week 7, a 31-yard run in week 6, a 49-yard run in week 5. He's getting steady usage, has wrested this job away from Damian Harris, and is essentially everything that we were advising people to draft him for. I thought in May, June, July, and August that he was going to take this job away. He clearly has done that and become the lead guy. He's the alpha back right now for New England, and he rounds out my top 12. Take a couple of seconds and go to smizzle.tv/charity. Every single dollar helps as we make our march towards $50,000 raised by the Smizz Gang community. That's you. The bonus is every $10,000 that you guys raise, I will personally match $10,000, hopefully getting to a goal of $100,000 by the time December 31st rolls around. All of your donations are completely tax deductible. They go through Tiltify at smizzle.tv/charity. They'll send you all of the tax paperwork that you need once you donate. Every single dollar helps. So please, if you enjoy the content, if you've won money this season, or if you just have a couple bucks laying around, and I guarantee you that most of the people in my community do have a couple of bucks laying around, go and donate to No Kid Hungry, providing school breakfasts and lunches to food insecure kids all across this country. At number 13, Travis Etienne Jr. He's going to introduce himself to the Brits this week, going against Denver. A tough rushing defense, obviously. However, that's not where we're really going to hang our hat with Travis Etienne. Now, the big playability on the ground has been there. 49-yard run in week 7, 48-yard run in week 6, 30-yard run in week 5, showing no ill effects from the ACL tear from last year, and had seen an increase the last 4 weeks. We talked about him the last couple of weeks moving out of McKissickville, moving out of Nyheim Hines-town, and now the Jaguars have traded James Robinson away to the New York Jets so that they could have running back cover, losing Breece Hall for the year. And so Travis Etienne now projects to be a 75 to 85% of the snaps and touches running back. That is exactly what we want, especially for a running back that is as good in the passing game as he potentially is, right? Like that's what his greatest skill was coming out of college. The big playability clearly there, as we've seen it flex the last few weeks. And now he's going to get the playing time volume. This is a smash spot. If you drafted him, congratulations to you. I felt that the draft price was too high. I still feel that it was a process mistake to take him at the back end of the 3rd round because of the opportunity cost of all the players that were going around him and a round or two later. Now, if his price was like 50 to 55, 50 to 60 on ADP, I probably would have drafted him even with James Robinson not being on physically unable to perform list. However, sometimes you get it in bad and you catch runner straight. So like, who can fault those teams who waited 7-8 weeks to get a full-time Travis Etienne? You now have him. He's my running back 13 on the week. Congrats to you. At running back 14, if you were drafting Raheem Mostert in the 18th round of drafts, you got one of the best bargains that is basically out there at this point in the season. Basically taking over all of the work. He had 16 opportunities in week 6. He had 21 opportunities in week 7. Way back in week 5, 21 opportunities. Week 4, 18 opportunities. People thought that it was going to be the Chase Edmonds show, but Chase Edmonds cannot really handle that much of a workload. Thankfully, Mostert has been healthy to this point, something that has eluded him. Previously in his career, he has been putting up monster numbers so far this year for the draft cost. 20.9 fantasy points in week 7, 22 fantasy points in week 5, and now gets a matchup against Detroit solidly at the running back 14 spot for me this week. Ken Walker the third also has we're at that time of year, right? Like, we know that running backs have a fail rate. They always have. They're kind of like closers when it comes to fantasy baseball. If you ever played fantasy baseball before, you know that 40% of the guys who are the closer on day 1 of the baseball season are not the closer on the last week of baseball season. It's just a position that has high attrition. It is what it is. And the same stands to be said for the running back position. It's why zero running back is a thing. It's why hero running back is a thing. It's why you can wait and take these guys at pick 100 or later, which is about where Ken Walker was going. And because of Rashad Penny's injury, Walker has stepped into one of the higher volume roles. Now, he's not getting very much pass game usage at all. That's just not what they're going to do in Seattle. They do not throw the ball to their backs often. However, Walker has great big playability. He is an elite running back prospect, and he has shown it with a 69-yard rushing touchdown in week 5 after Penny left with injury, 97 yards and a touchdown on the ground in week 6. And last week absolutely blew the doors off the Chargers for 168 and 2 touchdowns, 31.8 fantasy points in that game. He's going to be a solid producer moving forward. Tough matchup this week, or a tougher matchup against the Giants, whose defense has been doing quite well. At 16, I have Eno Benjamin in this spot because he's kind of a placeholder. Okay. If James Conner is back, Eno Benjamin slides all the way out and James Conner becomes the guy. Eno looked really good last week, and now in this matchup, 12 carries for 92 yards, caught 4 of 5 balls that were headed his way. If he's the only guy, if James Conner's out, then it's an easy 16 spot for me here for Eno. If Conner's in, then that kind of jumbles things. We move Eno out because Conner will take over at least 60, probably 70% plus of the running back snaps and touches. Behind them, again, this is it's weird for me to say these names as low as I'm saying these names, but like Aaron Jones comes in as my running back 17 on the week. Guy was being drafted at like the 17th overall spot during draft season. This Packers offense has looked really, really bad. Fortunately, okay, I'm saying fortunately, like they've looked really bad, but fortunately, because they've looked bad, they're going to just have to throw the ball a ton to Aaron Jones. Something we thought was going to happen earlier in the season, but most weeks, the only week he saw more than 4 targets before week 7 was week 1 when he saw 5. Since then, 3, 4, 4, 3, 4. And then in week 7 against Washington, 10 targets. That's how they're going to have to run this offense. They just don't have the talent on the outside. They don't have these dynamic guys that can get open. So they have to run their passing game through Aaron Jones. That's actually a very good thing for us because each target is worth more than each carry. If he was to get 10 to 15 carries a game and like 7-8 targets a game, kind of like that Alvin Kamara usage, I would be much higher on Aaron Jones. However, this is a difficult situation going to Buffalo on Sunday night. Massive underdogs in this game, but as Aaron Rodgers said, maybe it's the best thing for this team to be in that situation and really have to rally around one another and get better. So we'll see brighter days ahead for Aaron Jones. Hopefully, if he maintains this really high usage in the passing game and stays away, if this Green Bay Packers coaching staff can stay away from throwing him the ball like 4 times a game and start throwing him like 6, 7, 8 times a game, it would be great for the fantasy managers who drafted him. Behind him, Miles Sanders looked very good so far. Not much to say about Miles Sanders, to be very honest with you. Like, he's just had a solid year. Solid if unspectacular, however you want to put it. 15.1 fantasy points per game. He's got kind of a low floor. We've seen him put up 5.4 against Washington, 8.4 against Arizona. He's fresh, coming off of a bye week, squaring off against Pittsburgh, who you'd rather throw the ball than run the ball against. However, they don't really throw the ball to Miles Sanders, but this offense is extremely talented and should move the ball effectively. And the more they're inside the 10-yard line, we've seen his usage in the red zone and specifically inside the 5-yard line goal-to-go situations improve this year, scoring 4 touchdowns so far through their first 6 games. At number 19, I have Ezekiel Elliott. Caveat on Ezekiel Elliott, he got hit last week in a really awkward spot where when you saw the replay, it looked like he hyperextended his knee. Looked like it could have been like an MCL strain or something like that, which usually keeps guys out like 2 to 6 weeks. He came right back in the game. They're saying that he believes he has a contusion. He's got a bruise. He's got a bruised knee. So if he plays in this game, this is kind of where we have to slot him against Chicago. A tough run defense in their own right, but they do give it up to running backs, but specifically through the air. Like, running backs catch a lot of passes against Chicago, and they're not throwing the ball to their running backs. The preferred situation for fantasy in this spot is if Ezekiel Elliott, who I have at number 19, decides that they want to give him a week off and not play him here. Give him a week of rest. Get him back completely healthy, and they play Tony Pollard, which would really shake up my rankings because a Tony Pollard 90% snap share would probably move him up to like number 13, number 12. He'd be right there on the cusp of that Travis Etienne range, definitely ahead of Mostert. So he'd be a top 14, top 13 running back if it was only Pollard. But right now, Ezekiel Elliott's still in. I have to rank him at 19. Number 20, Jamal Williams. DeAndre Swift could not make it back after the bye week like all of us thought that he was going to. So Jamal Williams stays the main guy in Detroit. Got 15 carries, only 1 target. I am shocked that they're not using him at all in the passing game. In the time that Swift has been out, 2 targets in week 3, 3 targets in week 4, 0 targets against New England in a game that they got absolutely throttled 29-0, and 1 target against Dallas where they lost 24-6, lost Amon-Ra St. Brown, did not have DeAndre. They're just not throwing the ball to Jamal Williams. And like, he's a very solid pass catching back. They just refuse to throw him the football. I don't know. Like, Coach Campbell, I like you, but like, you got to do stuff better. You got to make better decisions than not throwing the ball to your running backs who are like out there on the field and are actually good at catching the football. So hopefully they utilize him that way. If DeAndre Swift is back, Jamal Williams moves down. Behind him, Devin Singletary. Tales of his demise have been greatly exaggerated. Everybody thought that it was going to be Cook, but it's not. It's Singletary. Carried it 17 times against Kansas City. Got 5 targets in that game. Very possible that 15 or 20 opportunities come his way, and anytime that you just exist in the Buffalo Bills offense, you carry touchdown upside with you. ADP stayed between like 100 and 120 the entirety of draft season, and it's definitely paying off if you drafted him on your teams. Behind him at 22, David Montgomery. Monty has looked good, an actually good running back on a really disappointing offense, but if you have him, you're playing him over basically everybody else that's behind him on this list. 15 carries each of the last 2 weeks, averaged over 4 yards per carry, got a touchdown run last week, breaks a lot of tackles. It's just a low volume offense. It doesn't move the ball all that effectively. Can cede some rushing yards and touchdowns to his quarterback, Justin Fields, who has been looking rather spry the last couple of weeks, something that should bode well, but unfortunately behind David Montgomery for his fantasy managers. Khalil Herbert also looks really spry. So like, now this is a 3-headed running back monster when you factor in Justin Fields' rushing, David Montgomery and his talent, and then Khalil Herbert earning his way onto the field. Montgomery comes in at 22. Would love to rank him higher, but can't in the time split that he's in right now. At 23, again, the beneficiary of an injury around him, Michael Carter from the New York Jets. Breece Hall out for the season with an ACL tear. The kid was looking really, really good. Now, Michael Carter has not been efficient when running the football so far this year. However, when you're the lead guy, now James Robinson just got traded for, and maybe they're going to utilize Robinson in a 50-50 role with Carter. Carter better in the passing game than Robinson is. He's only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. He's more of a pass catching back. We'd like to see him be that, but they're not throwing the ball that often. And when they do, Wilson does not target his running backs all that often over his first year and a half in the league. So they're going to have to run the ball. They've been running it well, but specifically better with Breece Hall versus Michael Carter. Hopefully Carter can step up to the increased usage at least this week. When he drops back to 50-50, if Robinson finds his way onto the field, I think it's going to be kind of like a situation where CMC last week, but he's not anywhere near as talented as CMC. So he may not force himself onto the field for 10 touches, but we may see like 5 carries out of James Robinson this week, with Michael Carter getting like 20 opportunities, however inefficient they may be. Speaking of inefficient touches, filling out my top 24 is Najee Harris. He's certainly getting enough volume to produce, but again, this is just a really bad offense. They're not throwing the ball more than like 5 yards down the field, like ever. They have 2 good of wide receivers in that trio between Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool and the rookie Pickens to keep dinking and dunking as much as they do, but they just don't have very much faith in Pickett to make good decisions. And he kind of showed that on that Island game where he's going to throw a lot of interceptions. He's not a great quarterback prospect, and he's looked okay. Maybe they just don't trust him. Maybe he's just average. The problem is the offensive line isn't great. They're not throwing him the ball more than 4 times a game. 4 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets each of the last 3 weeks. No targets against the New York Jets. 3 targets against the Cleveland Browns in week 3. So like, Harris is basically a guy that's got very little touchdown upside. He may score 7 touchdowns on the year. On a bright side, he may score 8, I suppose, like 9 as a ceiling. But you didn't draft him to do that if you're drafting him at the back end of the first round. He falls in here as my last RB2 on the week. His price in daily fantasy has fallen down. They project to play from way behind in this game against Philadelphia, and Philadelphia owns one of the best defenses in the league. Just another spot where Harris may be ridiculously inefficient in his rush attempts, have very little touchdown upside, and unfortunately, they won't throw him the ball enough to make it worth our while. So hopefully you like the list. Drop a like on the video. Look out for another one right there.
He's a legend.